Welcome back to the Religious Treehouse. I'm Jodie.
I'm Matthew.
How are you doing today, Matthew?
Oh, so good. I just went to a bookstore and I love a bookstore.
I'm not sure I can speak English, so I don't know if I'd appreciate what's in a bookstore, but did you get any books today?
I did nothing great, just some like random like introduction to like Old Testament and New Testament stuff that I've like have already, but I'm a sucker for introduction books. They're so much fun.
And you know what? Expanding your knowledge is what we're all about here, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we expanded our knowledge on musicals. The room was shocked.
Ooh.
Matthew, we finally watched a musical neither of us have seen.
Right, yeah.
That was a big moment. Would you like to tell the crowd what we watched?
We watched Fiddler on the Roof, which is a classic, one that I've been wanting to watch for years, but for some reason I've like never gotten around to. I like know all the music from it, but I've never like actually seen it. And it's so good. I'm very excited to talk about this. It was such a good musical. But yeah, we're watching what is it, 1971, 1973, Norman
Yes.
Jewison's Fiddler on the Roof.
Mhm.
This should be a fantastic conversation. I'm looking forward to this.
This will be phenomenal. Yeah, another musical that I was constantly like, why haven't I watched this? And then I looked at the 3 hour time line and I was like, oh, that's why. Because the only musical I'm able to give that amount of energy to is usually The Sound of Music. But this is apparently one of my mom's favorites. So
Really?
that was cool to learn. Um, shall we? Can I give a small little summary of the movie?
Yeah, give us a summary so those unfamiliar with it can converse with us.
In the small town of Tevka, there is a man. And this man, Tevye, he has five daughters. Five daughters, and he wants to marry off his daughters well, because that is the tradition. So we see Tevye as he marries off three of his daughters, kind of shrugging on that third one on whether or not he agreed to that. But it also explores the social relationship between the Russians and the Jews and the community aspects of having a community there. What are the struggles? And it all culminates in, unfortunately, an exiling of this town, the all the people of Anatevka needing to leave Russia. That wasn't one of my more upbeat ones, but this is not an upbeat movie.
No, it doesn't end like a happy, smiley movie. But yeah, no, this takes place in the late 1800s, early 1900s, um, in the fictional town of Anatevka during the Russian pogroms. So, not the happiest time period, but still a fantastic musical with so much to talk about. Really looking at, Russian Judaism in that time period, but also a very universal film. So I'm so excited. I'll let you start this conversation. Where do you want to take this?
Oh, let's start at the very beginning
Mhm. Good call.
with opening up on this man. It opens up on Tevye
Yeah.
talking. Is he talking to God initially? I feel like he was.
Yeah, it's kind of talking to God, talking to us, introducing the narrative.
Yeah.
Because we start with tradition song.
Mm-hmm.
Tradition. Uh,
Tradition.
so yeah, it's starts off there, and we kind of get introduced to the Fiddler on the Roof, like the title of the movie, being like they're in the precarious situation as if they're a fiddler on the roof, um, subject to slip and fall at any second. And it sets the stage well of a nice metaphor there, being Russian or being Jewish in Russia in that time period, dangerous time, as we see throughout the movie as the program starts off. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I love the song Tradition because it really exemplified the pride people took in their roles in the house. I mean, obviously, the movie started, I grabbed my notebook and I wrote down patriarchy. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, the patriarchy is running rampant here because it's like the man must make the decision and the woman must keep the home. But there was pride in these women, the way they kept their home and raised their children, and these men in making decisions that were good for the family, as long as they did it with the well-being of everyone in mind. But the Fiddler on the Roof in this movie is balancing tradition and the wants and needs of your loved ones and their desires and
Mhm.
moving forward in this new world as the world evolves around you. So it set the scene really well in my mind for that
Yeah,
structure.
no, I'll admit I was concerned at this first song. I was like, oh no, this isn't what I thought the movie was. This movie is going to be like super conservative presentation of like religion and like all that, just being like pro, you know way back then times. And then like as the movie went on, I go, okay, okay, we're playing with this, we're negotiating with it all. So I was like real excited by that by the end of it, but I was concerned for the first like 20 minutes of the film.
Oh,
But
thank goodness it wasn't just me.
yeah. Oh, but I think my only major critique of this film does come with this notion here that they're so focused on tradition. Like at one point, um, Tevka talks about like, well, why do we do these things? Why do we wear the prayer vests and all those things? And he says, why do we do this? I don't know. And I think reducing tradition to just, oh, that's something that we do is reductive, and that misses the point of Judaism and religion. I think having everything so focused on tradition outside of without having reason, without any explanation for it, I think that misses a point of a lot of things, and anyone in that position would know why they do things such as that. So that's like my only point of critique in the movie, and it plays out throughout the movie. But other than that, I think everything else I'm going to say is positive.
I would, oh my goodness, I'm going to disagree with you. I would say that was commentary though, because there are people who just do things because they are tradition and they don't look any further into it.
I certainly, but I think at this time period, someone who quotes "as the good book says" so many times, albeit incorrectly, so many times
Yeah.
as a joke, it he presents himself as a very learned man,
Yeah.
you to whatever extent that is at that time period,
Mhm.
and it is not common practice in these situations to just be doing tradition for the sake of tradition. um, at least in their mindset and in the mindset of the people practicing it. So saying tradition for the sake of tradition, I think this is the point of what was going on. But as we look on as the viewer, it does look like as an outsider, perhaps people doing traditions for the sake of tradition does seem to be what goes on a lot of the time.
But I think that was one of the points of Tevia's character was that he was really just doing it for the sake of he knew that's how he should live.
Yeah, and that's my critique of the movie. I
Okay.
don't think that's realistic. I don't think that um,
It's not
is good
supposed to be.
characterization of the situation.
But it's a good character for the audience of which it was supposed to speak to. Because like to it, there is this in the time this was released in the 1960s, I would say there was probably a good chunk of people who just do things because that's the way they were raised.
Yeah, well, I think this being released in the late '60s, um, I think this definitely felt like a response to the feminist movement and to the student movement in Russia and the Eastern Europe. Like this came out, I think, a few months after the feminine mystique. It's like this is entrenched in feminism and the communist thought and socialist thought and progressive ideologies, and we see that throughout. So I don't think it's necessarily against that. I think it's progressing that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I just, I think it was good that they made his character so simplified and not accurate. Like, because that helps move the story along and may, it kind of holds a mirror to some people who at that time, like, weren't listening to these more progressive voices. But again, at the same time, also what happens with Tevi at the end, he just makes that divide. He's such a complex character because every time he said the good book says, I'm like, sure, yeah, I believe you. I believe you. He was it's kind of like a funny caricature of those holier than thou men who they know things are supposed to be this way because it's supposed to be this way, and they
Yeah.
iterate things from a Bible or a book of some kind just because, and they say it's from there, but it's not actually from there, and they're misunderstanding. And he was the embodiment of some of the things I hate most.
Yeah. Well,
And
I
the
don't think
entire time I was delighted by him.
yeah, I don't think when he was, quoting the Bible as the good book says, I don't think he was, misquoting it. I think he was joking. I think that was an intentional
Yeah.
choice on his part to be like, oh, as Moses says, as David says, and then really it's actually quoting um,
Yeah.
whoever else it was. I
It
don't
was
remember.
as Abraham says, as David says, but he was quoting Moses both times.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I think that was an intentional comedic choice, not him, misunderstanding.
Yeah. Um, no, but sorry, I don't mean misunderstanding, but the misquoting, misrepresenting, I guess,
Right, right.
is more what I mean to say. Misrepresenting the words and not getting it 100% correct, just reiterating things they've heard.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Is
think you're right in that sense that it holds up the mirror to society watching that. Like, how much do we do just because it's the way that we do things? And I think that's a good thing to think about that this film brings up. And then it puts us in specific situations with the three daughters on how to, negotiate with those things, which is fascinating because, especially in the religious context of how this works out, uh, how do religions evolve? How do religions change? And we see this, especially with the rise of modernity in the 1900s, 1800s, 2000s, as we become more and more involved with the outside world, as they kept calling it. Like we have, like religions have to evolve and change and keep up with how it's practiced. And I think they did a really good job of showing the push and pull that happens through this, where there are generations that are pushing for change that the older generations aren't okay with. And it takes push and pull and negotiation and struggle to get, some generations, some ways of thinking into coming to terms with how things evolve in the natural scheme of things. And I think as young people that we are right now, it's a lot easier for us to see, hey, this is how things are changing. That's so relatable that things should be changing. This is good. Things evolve. But I assume in 30 years times we're going to be in the opposite shoes because that's just how we work. 30 years things are going to be happening, things are going to be progressing, and we're going to be cranky old people. Wow, all the times are changing. How dare they? So I think this shows a really good progression of how humanity works, and in this particular instance, how religion works.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with you on the cranky old people part. I'm already having a rough time wrapping my head around the furries, and people are trying to find a slur for AI robots. And those are the wild times we live in. So this struggle between tradition and what's new, at the center of it is in fact the matchmaker, an
Sure.
important character who I don't think gets her due because she is matchmaking this entire time. She is working hard, and she is a driving force for the story and like these things Tevye has to combat with because
Yeah.
he's a poor man with 5 daughters. He has to get these girls married off, and he wants to
Hmm.
get them married off well.
Right. Yeah, and that's the it's this feminist idea of these young girls are counteracting the traditional ways of marriage, but still doing it within the confines of marriage. So it's
Mhm.
not like this ultra feminist critique that we might expect from the 60s, where this came out of, but it's still pushing the boundaries that are expected. And so it takes out the expected way of, hey, matchmakers, two people, prearranged marriages, bada bing, bada boom, and asking the question, should we marry for love and all those types of things. And I've got thoughts on that, but that's neither here nor there for this conversation. So I think there's a lot happening there as it's commenting on that.
Yeah. Because initially, so during tradition, you actually see the butcher and the oldest daughter. What is her name? Chez
Zeidel.
Zeidel. Zeidel. You see them interact. So
Mm-hmm.
they give you that early on. And then the matchmaker comes to Goldie and says, hey, the butcher laser likes your oldest daughter. Let's make that happen. And Goldie's like, well, Tevye wants her to have a learned man, a smart man, but okay. And it's coming up upon Sabbath. He's been working all day. His horse is lame. He had to draw the cart. Into town comes this educated Jewish man, Perchik. He invites him to Sabbath. His daughters at this point have sang the Matchmaker song, which is my favorite. Did you know that in Mrs. Doubtfire, Robin Williams parodied the Matchmaker song?
I did not.
That is just one example of Fiddler on the Roof influencing popular culture that you will be getting today. So that happens. And then they're at Sabbath. They have the dinner. Goldie finally approaches him and is like, hey, you should go talk to the butcher. Tevye goes to talk to the butcher. They come to an agreement. In the background of this, although you know that the daughter really wants to be with the tailor model. She's like, we love each other. And the entire time her father is selling her off to a man who cuts meat for a living. But hey, at least he's rich. And then we get into a song there where we get the dancing and we see some harmony between the Jews of Anatevka and the Russians.
Yeah.
Because that tension is just like lying underneath Tevye's entire story. And that's when you first kind of see it. But you see them living a little harmoniously. Like their dances are a little different, but they're able to just vibe. I thought that was a beautiful depiction of, I think, the social relationship they had.
Yeah, no, the dance scenes I think were fantastically well done. They're entertaining and like I don't know. I don't know how to interpret dance very much, but I could very easily look at that dance and be like, oh, they're coming to terms with each other. It's okay. Which the Russians, the Gentiles and the Jews, kind of coexisting, still separated and distancing themselves from each other, but for the most part being chill with each other. And I thought they did a really good part at showcasing that. And this, of course, is when Laser Wolf and Tevka have agreed that that their daughter, why can't we remember her name? Zeitel. Zeitel is going to marry Laser Wolf without ever consulting her at all, which that felt icky. It was up until this point. Up until this point, I was like, I don't know about this. And then after this point, it got better. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. We're doing fun things with it.
So Tevye is at like the height of his joy. He's like, the world's going good. My oldest daughter is going to be married to a well-off Jewish man. We're coinciding, living harmoniously with the Russians. He's thinking, this is great. This is fantastic. Well, and then he finds out the tailor wants to marry my daughter because they can't. He tells his daughter that she is going to be married to the butcher and she is distraught. Her sisters are like, congratulations, very begrudgingly. Perchik's like, okay. And Goldie's over the moon. His wife is so happy. And what is he as a husband supposed to do but make his wife so happy until he sees his darling eldest born distraught because she's in love with the tailor and he's in love with her and they want to be married. Let them be married. And he stops. And I loved the cinematography of them looking so far away while he's talking to God and looking up at God. Oh my God, I just realized I completely skipped the rich man part. We'll visit that at another point. But just the juxtaposition of his distance to them while the camera is zoomed in on his face. So it's like he's having a face-to-face conversation with God. And he's like, why are you doing this to me? Like, what am I supposed to do about this? She's happy. I want her to be happy, but my wife will be upset. What was your thought on that?
Yeah, it's the internal monologue that he's having, which I think is so well done, and we get that as he's talking to Laser Wolf as well. And we get there's pieces of humor scattered throughout this. On the one hand, yada yada. On the other hand, yada yada. On the other hand, yada yada. And he always comes to terms with what people are asking of him. Laser Wolf asks him for Zeitel, and he's like, yeah, no, this will work out. We can make this work. And then Zeitel and modal are like, hey, we actually want to get married, and he comes to terms with it, and it's not until the last one where it diverges. But so I thought that was very well done. I especially Laser Wolf's face, how that was frozen there while we're getting Tevye's thoughts. I thought was very good.
Yeah. Tevye's inner monologues, his like inner conversations with God kind of reminded me of Abraham, at least the way I read Abraham in our reading of the Bible.
Mm,
Just there were some similarities of the casualness. Did we want to go back to Rich Man real quick while I
sure.
remember? Okay. But before we do that, I need everyone to know the song Tradition was sampled in 8 different songs, including Famine by Sinead O'Connor and a Halta Skelta song. It was sampled in rap. These are cool things. Now back to Rich Man. Before any of this happens, Tevye's dreaming of what his life would be like if he was a rich man. What stood out to you in that song?
I feel. I mean, this is like the song people know from this musical. I feel like to me, this is thinking about Fiddler on the Roof. You think of this song. If I were a rich man, doodle 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 doodle. I don't, it's so good. It's so catchy, and you just kind of want to dance along with him. I love the way he dances. It's so good. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. I found this to be a good moment of comic relief as he's kind of pontificating about what if I were rich? I'd biddle biddle bum all the day long, and who doesn't want to biddle biddle bum all the day long, whatever that means. So I thought it was this very good insight into understanding the poor conditions of these people and fantasizing about what it would be like to be well off, which and he talks to God, or does Perchik come in at the end of the song or at another point where Perchik, who's this very scholarly, pushing he communist for sure, and is eventually arrested later on for leading a pro-communist revolt in Russia before communism took over in Russia. So and he tells uh, uh, Tevye it's a curse to be rich, and Tevye jokes, "May God curse me with this for all his days," or something along those lines. So I don't know. I think that's very funny because again we see these new ideas being pushed by Perchik, being like, "Hey, what if we think about not all being poor and trying to find a way to get out of this if we work together, promote these socialist communist ideas, however you feel about that, um, as opposed to just doing things the way that they've been done, you know, being a milkman in Anatevka." So I think this was a really good way of showing the parallels of how things were done and how things could change in ways that it could change in a way that would be comfortable and happy for uh, Tevye, because like I think that shows that tradition is tradition until something better comes along, and when something better comes along for someone, it's often for worse for someone else. And we see that throughout the movie as the daughters have their own better way of doing things, their own better traditions that take away the power from Tevye that he's so used to and comfortable with having. So it's very easy to add new traditions to your religion, to update your religion as it suits you. But as you see your religion being updated and changed in a way that doesn't suit you, that can be very scary, and you don't like that. And that's I had no idea I had these thoughts until right now. But that's what we see nowadays with like the rise of Christian nationalism in America. It's not that the minorities religious identities are taking over power and reducing Christianity to something smaller, making fun of Christianity and all that. It's that Christianity has white nationalist Christianity, however you want to look at that, has been in power and in control for so long, and it is their tradition to be in that control that it changes, that these tiny pieces of changing items that just happen to be different are met with such resistance because the tradition takes away the power that they have. So I think it does a really good job at looking at tradition in that way through this rich man song.
All God's people said amen. That was beautiful. And it does. It's reflected through this. And that leads us back in to the first initial re-engagement of the first daughter,
Mhm.
is that Tevye has to wrestle with that because he's like, well, I made a decree, I made a deal. But you're
Yeah.
looking at me telling me he's also a Jewish man. He's not rich, but you love him.
Mhm.
Well, who am I to stand in your way to a certain point? Like, it's not like she's really bending the rules too much for
Yeah.
this man.
No, as each daughter tries to get married, they bend tradition more and more. And it starts off small with oh my goodness, why can't I remember her name? Zeitel.
Title.
Zeitel. It starts small with Zeitel, like, hey, what if instead of marrying this random guy who's way, way older than me and we don't really know that well, what if I married this dude that you've known our whole life and I really like him, yada yada. And it's untraditional in some sense. What does he say? Unthinkable, absurd, but he can come to terms with it. It takes a little thinking, a little changing, but they come to terms with it. And that one's fairly easy because it's not too big of a step out of his comfort zone.
So it's one he's comfortable making. It's a risk he's comfortable taking because he has to explain this to his wife Goldie some way. So in his beautiful little Tevye mind, he's like, I will have a nightmare. I will have a nightmare. And in this nightmare, my wife's great aunt will visit us, as well as Laser's deceased wife. And they will come to us and tell us that this union is not wanted, it is not blessed, it is cursed, and instead our daughter should marry the tailor. And that's what will make it good for Goldie, because Goldie's a superstitious woman.
Mhm.
You see the superstition throughout the traditions, through the way they do things, like using a matchmaker. They use a matchmaker because if you don't have a specific person dictating how this goes down, then it could just not be a good union. But then Tevye, in his mind, he's like, well, who's the ultimate matchmaker if not God? When he went into the who match made Adam and Eve,
Mhm.
was God not the original matchmaker? Have you brought them together? Have you made this match? How could we not bless this match if you've made this match? And so he was able to do his own mental gymnastics
Yeah.
to make it okay, and then helped Goldie do her own mental gymnastics to make it okay, and then it was okay for everyone.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about Judaism is that so much is in flex that when we study, yeah, comparing Judaism and Christianity isn't always the best way, but most people who listen to us know more about Christianity. Like when you look at Christianity, there tends to be a lot of the times feels to be some sort of rigidity in the rules, like this is how things are, this is how they go. But in Judaism, a lot more of the time, the theology is determined through these conversations, through these back and forths. Like rabbinic literature, very, very rarely does it say this is so and so, this is good, this is bad, this is whatever. It's this conversation between two rabbis, negotiating with each other and arguing and going back and forth, and not necessarily always coming to an agreement, to coming to a conclusion, and being able to wrestle with that, throughout their faith, I think is really inspiring and really cool.
It's I like the flexibility. I love some flex. I love some room to maneuver because I feel when you have room to maneuver, it makes it easier to grow.
Yeah, and to each their own. It works forever. I think having the rigid structure is helpful for some as well. Like however you do your theology, like there's no like wrong way to do theology, but looking at the Christian methodology, if you have much more rigid structures, your rules and all that, that by no means represents all of Christianity, but perhaps the stereotypical type. Like it can be helpful for people to be like, hey, this is this is good. So I'm not saying that one way is better than the other. I'm just saying that both ways are interesting in their own right and shouldn't just be dismissed because it's not the way that you're used to doing it.
Yes. So as the fiddler with his first daughter's marriage, Tevye manages to stay on the roof. And then we get to a second daughter, Hodel. And Perchek has been educating the two youngest girls, and he's kind of flirting with Hodel, kind of being like, "Oh, you're witty." When he called her wit, he didn't even like call her pretty. I thought that was wonderful. Like he commented on her wit and her
Mhm.
intelligence. He didn't reduce her to her looks or how she'd make a good housewife. I know he was truly there as a man of communism and a man of advancement, and that's what he should do. But I like it. It makes me happy. And they decide they want to be married. The way they
Yeah,
went
well,
about the engagement, though.
but before that, we have the wedding of
Oh,
Zyto
yes,
and Hotel, which I
you're
think
right.
there's a lot to be said there, which is where we see kind of their relationship kind of take public form.
Oh,
Uh,
yes.
but like at the wedding, I think they did a really good job of because that's Sunrise Sunset,
Yes,
beautiful
you're right.
song. That's the one that's like lit by candles, right? For the most part.
Yes.
Like I think that one's so good that shows one visually it shows the Jewishness of this movie. It's very much representing Judaism and all of the visual aspects, but the words don't. Like for the most part, the words are this very general song, and I think that's what makes this movie so good. That you can enjoy it for the particularities. You can look at it as a Jew and enjoy the particularities of it and understand all that. But and I think this is probably due to a lot of Norman Jewison, the director's influence. It is also very accessible to the non-Jew, to the Gentile that looks at this movie and doesn't really understand the intricacies of all the Jewish customs that are happening. So, and Norman Jewison being a Gentile was essentially one of the very few people who worked on this film that wasn't Jewish. I think that did a really good part at making this whole movie accessible by interweaving the particularities of everything and also having a very clear universal message.
That was so like the way you watch this movie is so different than the way I do because I was like, how many times has this song been covered? It's been covered 30 times by Connie, including by Connie Francis and Louis Armstrong, as two of the individuals who have covered it. It was a song I didn't realize I knew it until I was watching the movie and I was like, oh wait, this is familiar. It was such a beautiful thing. And yeah, I have no words. Did you know it's still played at weddings today?
Sunrise Suns. I mean, it makes sense.
Like commonly
Yeah, it
for
wouldn't
people.
surprise me.
No, it's a beautiful song and it sets the scene because it felt like it took a turn for me when Laser was there and then he got upset because we just had these like beautiful moments, the beautiful setting with the song, and then he's getting in Tevia's face and being like, she was supposed to be my bride, it was supposed to be my wedding, and there's our fiddler on the
Mm,
roof at his daughter's wedding, like, how do I make this okay for everyone?
yeah, and that gives um what's his face? Oh my goodness, I'm so bad at remembering all these people's names
Laser
right now.
Wolf?
No, no,
No.
the
Perchik?
communist.
Perchik!
Perchik. This gives Perchik the opportunity to step in and quiet everyone down and talk about tradition again and how things change because traditionally the men dance and the women dance separately, and he kind of breaks down the barrier literally and crosses into the women's section, asks people to dance, and eventually he gets Hodel to dance, the second youngest daughter, and people are gasping. Laser Wolf is aghast at like how could they do this, and we see the mental gymnastics that Tevye has to go through of, oh my goodness, what is going on? We're breaking this tradition. And that's taking him another step further out of his comfort zone. But then he comes to terms with it and he dances with his wife. And then Zeitel and um, her new husband begin dancing. And eventually they trick the rabbi into dancing, and he realizes he's been tricked into dancing with a woman. And then he realizes it and he starts dancing and he's so excited. And again, this is just another exploration of how religions adapt and change and update, and perhaps more quickly than they do in real life. Here it's showing things back to back to back happening really quickly, but acknowledging that religions do change in whatever form it does, religions or society. I think this may be more cultural than religious for sure,
Yeah.
but things are changing and you have to be aware of it.
Yeah, no, I loved like in the moment before the dancing started, they asked the rabbi, is dancing at weddings forbidden? And he's like, well, it's not forbidden. And Tevye's like, you heard the man. Let's hear it.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. This is also when we get the bottle dance,
Yeah,
correct?
fantastic.
Oh my gosh, I love the bottle dance. It, it's so good. I've seen different iterations of it.
Mhm.
I do think this one is my favorite.
Yeah, I mean it's great because you start off with one guy with a bottle on his head, and you think, "Oh, that's cool. He's balancing a bottle on his head." And then a second guy shows up, and you're like, "Wow, two people balancing a bottle on their head." And then two more show up, and it's like they do this intricate dance of movement, and it's so good visually. Like we can't explain it on a podcast
No.
here, but it's so good, it's so fascinating to watch.
Look up Fiddler Bottle Dance. If you want it from a different place, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is a good bottle dance. Again, watching this movie, I was like, there are so many things I have seen in other TV shows
Yeah.
and other forms of media that originated here.
Well, I don't think the bottle dance originated here,
I
but
I didn't mean the bottle dance specifically, but
yeah.
sorry.
No,
I
you're good.
understand how it comes across though when I'm bringing it up at the bottle dance. Um,
Yeah.
specifically, I'm just stuck on Rich Girl by Gwen Stefani and Rich Man. Because did you know, guys, Rich Man was sampled into a song called Rich Girl by Louie Lou and Mitchie One. And then it was later covered by Gwen Stefani, which is the cover you may be more familiar with. And in the early 2020s, Flo Milli did the Roaring Twenties, which sampled If I Were a Rich Man.
Right. And these are all people that I should have heard of.
I don't know.
Okay, cool.
I don't know. I only know Flo Milli's beginning hook to her songs, which I can't say on here because we avoid saying certain words. Moving on. After that, after we've had the bottle dance, we've had the wedding. People have been soothed. Tevye's like, "Oh, life is good. My oldest daughter, is married to a Jewish man. He wants a sewing machine. Can you get him a sewing machine, God? Can you get this man
Yeah.
a sewing machine?" And then his second oldest comes up to him with a communist and says, "Father, we want your blessing
Right.
to be married."
Right. Well, yeah. And before this, we have the
Oh,
scene where um the Russian soldiers come in and
oh
destroy
yeah.
the wedding, and the wedding ends on the sad note of like everything being destroyed. I think it's important to
Yes, that
recognize that there's this
you're right.
progression of Jewish violence being placed against them that eventually ends in a pogrom at the end of the film. But yeah, we continue on, and we have the
No, we have to talk about that more. We have to talk about that
okay.
more. I keep wanting to skip to the fun, happy things. We got to talk about that because Tevye had been promised not much would happen.
Right.
Tevye had the word of the constable that not a lot was going to go down. It would not be big. And if it was, he would warn him.
Yeah, and probably to the constable's imagination, oh, we've disrupted one wedding, set a house or two on fire, destroyed a couple things here and there, broke a few windows here and there. Not that big of a deal to the person that's not doing bad things to.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just an example of Jewish violence in the movie that has no real reason, as all anti-Semitic violence is baseless. But violence in general, wherever we want to
All violence.
look at it from. But yeah,
So things took a bad turn, but he's hoping for good to happen now. He has one daughter married off, one less mouth to feed. You, possibly, I think she's pregnant at this point, which when I think about the timeline of everything, or has she had the baby? Either way, his second wants his blessing to get married to a communist who's leaving the next morning. And then
yeah,
he
no,
would send for her.
yeah. It takes Yente, not Yente.
Tevye.
I just looked up at my screen and saw the word Yente. It takes Tevye. Um, Same letters, just in a different order. It takes Tevye um, one step further out of his comfort zone, removing him from tradition even further. Um, Again, unlike the first marriage, they didn't ask for permission. They said they were getting married. They just wanted the blessing. So he has this internal monologue again. He's wrestling with himself, and eventually he comes to terms with it. And the daughter eventually leaves to go after um, Perchik, who is arrested for stirring up a revolt, a little tiny revolt in the city square. And was it Kiev?
Yes, it was in Kiev. And Tevye reconciled this in his brain with he's Jewish and he's learned. He's a knowledgeable man. He is intelligent and Jewish. He may not be the one I picked for her. He may not be someone a matchmaker picked for her, but at least he is these two things.
Right.
But yes, they went off to Kiev because Perchik knew other people in Kiev who were getting together. As many great men in media do, they fight against terrible powers and then get arrested. So,
and then he gets imprisoned in Siberia, which is where she goes off to, and that's essentially the last we hear of them.
Yeah, no, she's just kind of waiting around from him. It's
Yeah.
sad, but he's doing the good work. So, what's a girl to do? I mean, she could have married someone else, but sure. And in the background of all of this, Hava, the middle child, the youngest of the oldest three, has met a boy. They've shared a book. And you get the feeling this man is not Jewish. But that's happening in the background while Tevye is dealing with this. What else is happening during this time for Tevye?
I think that's the main thing.
That's just it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then his third daughter runs off and gets married.
Yeah, because she married Fiedka. Was that his name?
Shava.
Fiedka. Yeah,
Fiedka,
Shava
right.
marries
Shava married
Fiedka,
Fiedka.
and
Yeah.
Fiedka is a Russian soldier, and tensions are definitely rising here, and we see that Fiedka is one of the good ones, whatever that may mean. As he tries to get his friends and stuff to stop harassing Hava, and eventually their friendship blossoms, and then their romantic relationship blossoms, and then knowing that would be greatly opposed by Tevye, they run off and get married without asking permission, without asking for a blessing. She's marrying a non-Jewish person, and when Tevye finds out, it's too much. That he couldn't reckon with that. We have that scene where he has that inner monologue. On the one hand, yada yada. On the other hand, yada yada, and he can't go back and say and justify it. That tradition is just too much for him to get past. Which, I love. Things of three, I think, are so good, and we expect Tevye to come to terms with it, but we don't, and he essentially disowns his daughter, which is fascinating. And I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'll come back to my thoughts later.
The progression of each of the three girls, of their engagements, their journeys to being married, the way they speed up incrementally from the oldest to the youngest, my mind was worrying because by the time we get to Hava, things are going at an exponentially faster speed than they were in the beginning, because she and Fiedka, Hava and Fiedka are at this booth. They break apart. Tevye's like, who is that boy? And she's like, a friend. And he's like, good, he must remain a friend from a distance. And then the next thing you see, Goldie is going to not a Jewish rabbi, but I'm assuming Orthodox Catholic.
Yeah, Orthodox.
And she's going to this church that is not her church. At this time, I would assume that would be a big deal.
Yeah.
Even though they were very welcoming, I'm assuming, but to basically ask, and you're left under the assumption that they went to a reverend and got married, which is like a big no for Tevye and Goldie.
Yeah, I mean, at this time period, and as it still is in a lot of cultures, both Jewish and non-Jewish, like you don't marry outside of your religion. You don't marry outside of your cultural group. So that, and famously in the Bible and biblical stuff, that it says Jews marry Jews, and et cetera, et cetera. So that was just too far for Tevye to accept.
Yeah, and it was a severe escalation in compared to the other girls. It doesn't look like an escalation maybe to you or I, or even to Hava, because she's like, neither of those men were rich that my elder sisters married. Like,
Yeah.
and Perchik didn't even have the same kind of traditional values we did. So she sees her father easing off. So it makes sense in her brain, like maybe he would be a little open-minded to this, but you get to the point where Goldie has gone to Tevye, told him that Hava is married to Fiedka. Tevye's there having his inner monologue with God, and in through, like, he doesn't see Hava come up because he's in this internal monologue. He's not paying attention to anything but trying to think about this. And she finally catches his attention, and you see that she's basically dead to him to a
Mhm.
certain degree. He ignores her, and he's like,
Yeah.
"You're no family of mine. Yeah, I'm going to move on with this. Is too much. I have been pushed too far." He is the fiddler on the roof trying to maintain balance.
Mhm.
And trying to think of that from the aspect of a father who loved his daughter so much, he did such backbreaking work pushing his cart that he would constantly have to manually use because his horse was lame, and he still cared for and took care of the horse. My heart broke for him, and of course my heart broke for her,
Yeah.
because she's like, he can accept my other two sisters' marriages. They're not perfect. Why can't he accept mine?
Mhm.
It was just heartbreaking all around. I cried. I'm not ashamed of it. It was heartbreakingly beautiful and just a gorgeous reflection of how people have to wrestle with those kind of things.
Yeah. Oh, slightly moving away from this, I
Yes.
think it's also very well made. I very much appreciated how often, like, we get a common trope. Like, it's very common in media to, especially of this time period and even up now, to get the relationships not approved of by the parent. And so often we get the perspective of the people in the relationship. But what was so innovative and different and refreshing about this whole movie is that we always got the perspective of Tevye, of the father. And I thought that was so, different than what we're so used to. And it was done really well. That I feel like how we're describing Tevye, like, if people are just listening to us, they're thinking, oh, Tevye is this bad guy. But I couldn't imagine anyone really watching this movie and not liking Tevye. Like, as much as, like, we're saying that's critiquing Tevye, he's still presented in this way that's very approachable, very likable, and very understandable. Like, you understand where he's coming from. Like, it's not coming from this evil, bad perspective. And by looking at these relationships from his perspective, I think was so unique and innovative. Maybe not innovative; it's probably been done, but it's certainly not done as much as looking at it from the daughter's perspective or the son's perspective.
It's more nuanced because
Yeah.
Tevye is deeply entrenched. Tevye has a marriage that was founded happily upon this tradition. The song between him and Goldie,
Mhm.
where he asks, like, "Do you love me?"
Yeah.
I The first time I heard that song was on Gilmore Girls. Do you know who Sean Gunn is? His brother is James Gunn, who directs Guardians of the Galaxy and the new Superman.
Okay.
Anyways, he plays this character in the show called Kirk, and Kirk is this old man who takes odd jobs around the town. And so the first time I ever saw it was between this 30-year-old looking man and a 10-year-old girl. And I was like, "Ooh, this is weird," but it's because it was a community theater production and they couldn't find anyone else to play Tevye. It's a weird storyline. Anyways,
Okay.
so then when I saw it through this lens of like two people around the same age, it finally clicked and made sense for me that, like, she's like, "For 25 years, I have been washing this man's clothes. I have been taking care of his children. I've been doing all these things. And he wants to ask about love. Is love not the actions I have been taking?" And Tevye not really knowing or understanding, because he's like seeing his daughters running off with this love. And maybe he's asking himself, like, have I missed out on something? Like, does my wife love me? Am I in love? He has to question his entire
Mm.
existence.
Yeah, and I think this does a really good job at showing the counter perspective of what this whole film has been progressing this whole time. Instead of looking at this relationship in this new way that transcends tradition. It's looking at the relationship that it was done the right way, that was done through the tradition, and it still worked out. This movie isn't saying that the only way think people can be happy, the only way to do things is through this new, you know, you know, subversion of tradition. That there are multiple ways to do things. There's no one way to do your culture. There's no one way to be happy. There's no one way to do your religion. The old way, the traditional way, can also work for people. That's not to say that the traditional way is always bad, but things can change. And for people that the change is good for, cool. And for the people that the change wasn't good for, keep doing it that way for yourself. I think I like that. That's one of my favorite songs in the whole movie because of that. Because it takes everything that this movie has been progressing and flips it and says that's still okay. And I think that's very Jewish of this as well, where it has this inner monologue with itself and it disagrees. We're disagreeing with itself, just like the rabbinical text that I talk about. There's this internal disagreement, and it doesn't come to a necessary conclusion. It looks at both ways and just kind of leaves it there for you. And I think that's beautiful. I think that was very well done.
Yeah. Sorry to go on the Gilmore Girls rant. Just another way that Fiddler on the Roof can be depicted in pop culture. Yeah, so he basically writes off Hava, and then they're told they have to leave.
Yeah, the pogrom starts. The soldiers come in and say, you got three days to go out, with no warning whatsoever, with no anything to, no justification really. It's just pure unadulterated anti-Semitism that has always been around, which is awful. But it just happens, and they just have to leave. They have to come to terms with it. They go off to Russia. One of them's going to Israel, which these pogroms definitely were a part of the Zionist movement kind of growing, because they had nowhere to go, and it kind of improved the desires to like create a Jewish homeland. So I don't think in any small part these Russian pogroms, they definitely promoted the Zionist movement in whatever form it looks like from 150 years ago to today. So there's a lot going on here as well, and it's devastating. It kind of just ends on that, and there's a lot more that we'll talk about before it ends, but it just ends on the pogrom, then them leaving. The family kind of separates. Everyone goes off their own way, and they're going off to New York. Laser Wolf's going to Chicago, and it's just there's no like good real resolution except for kind of with Hava that we'll talk about real quickly. But it just kind of ends, and I think that's such a good way to end a movie. Like it doesn't have to end with all sunflowers and happiness, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, in my mind, it picks up in American Tail, Fievel Goes West.
Uh,
And are you not familiar with
I'm not
that?
familiar with that.
It actually, Fievel Goes West not Goes West, but Fievel Going to America, the first American Tales, begins with the Jewish community of mice being tossed out of Russia and
Okay.
going to America. And I think there is a argument to be made there that Fievel picks up where Fiddler on the Roof ends. And I just realized that. I'm going to do some research on that because it
Okay.
takes place around the same time. You see Matthew getting concerned because I'm just talking. And that is how this normally goes. What do you want to talk about, Hava?
Sure. It's not that, I'm concerned about what you're saying. I'm sure what you're saying is great, but you just talk about things that are like things I should know about, maybe, but I don't know who Fievel is.
I don't know how
Apparently,
you
he's a mouse.
he's a mouse. He's this Jewish mouse. His family is told there are no cats in America and the streets are filled with cheese. So after they are ousted from their Russian homeland, his father takes them to America where they learn there are in fact cats in America. Cats being a kind of like underlying pseudonym for fascism. Um,
Sure.
and like anti-Semitism. Like everything's good in America. There's no cats. There's no danger in America. There is danger in America. Anyways, going back, Hava. Hava and her good Russian man. One of the good
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. We see that Hava and Fiotka,
Pietka.
Fiedka. These names, so hard for me to remember. Um, just names in general. They kind of come to terms. They were like, okay, we want to talk to Tevye and be like, hey, we're leaving too because we can't stand to live with people that would treat other people this way. It's just inhumane, yada yada. And we get, for the most part, Tevye is ignoring them still, but he gives a blessing at the very end. May God bless you. So he, kind of comes to terms with the the final relationship there.
And then Goldie yells out, "We'll be at my uncle's in New York," and basically opens the door because, the father is the one who guides the family on the path, but the mother is the one who manages the home. So, Tevye kind of turns on Goldie and is like, "Why did you say that?" But he opened the door. He
Sure.
said something. He opened that door of communication back up, and Goldie, as his wife, took advantage of that. And it was a beautiful thing, and I kind of feel like it was like the bookend on tradition opening it, and then that at the closing, because it was an example of the tradition of the father having the final say, and his final say was a blessing to them. And
Sure.
Goldie just
But
she
yeah.
just went in there. I loved her.
Well, yeah, and this, if I remember correctly, diverges from the source material
Mm.
that this comes from. Like, if I remember correctly, it from what I know about this, Tevye doesn't ever come to terms with Hava's relationship. Um,
Yeah, that makes
and-
more sense for a stage adaptation.
yeah, but the what you call it, who wrote it? Shalom. Al, gosh, I can't remember. But we get Tevye the Milkman. We have a bunch of stories from him, and that was eventually adapted into Fiddler on the Roof.
Oh, didn't know that.
Yeah, so yeah, Tevye the Milkman was like this character used in this guy's stories, and we
Mm.
get. I think this is kind of like a merging of a handful of stories um, from the early 1900s, which you know simultaneous to when this stuff is happening somewhat. So yeah, here we are, and you diverge the material to make it relevant. You change tradition because that's what happens. So I don't know. I think there's a lot to be said with this movie. That's the main things I have to say regarding plot. I feel like we've gone on for quite a while. I think this is
We
going to be one of our longer episodes.
But that's okay because it's about Fiddler on the Roof, which is one of the longest musicals I've ever watched. So
Yeah,
that's fine. I do have some other pop culture things, but I want to save those for the end. So any other thoughts?
I'm good. I think this is all good. I think this film has taken a big place in a lot of various cultures. It's very universal, as I said. One like famously, I don't remember who says it, but someone in Japan says, "How is this so popular in America when it's so clearly a Japanese film?" So like this film transcends culture and is very relevant to so many people that watch it. It's you know you know hyper it's very very Jewish, but it's also very very universal, and I think that's what makes it so appealing and so good. There's so much more that we could talk about this film, but we don't have time for. Like, of all the films that we've watched so far that we reviewed, watch this one. I think this one is perhaps the most relevant to whatever's going on in the world and to just quality of film. I think it won like 3 Oscars and it should have won more. But
Yes, the
yeah,
film won 3 Oscars. The original stage adaptation was nominated for 10 Tonys and won 9.
yeah,
So I think you'll feel like you're in for quality no
yeah.
matter what version you watch. And
Yeah, and if you want to split it up into 2 watch sessions, there's a nice little intermission at the hour and 45 minute mark. So split it up into 2 nights.
honestly, that is one thing I miss about film musicals and intermission built into the movie.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing to have. Wicked, John Chu, if you're listening, put an intermission in, bro. So I won't go into my more silly things, but I will share this one piece of thing in it's not really pop culture, but world news. In 2015, a displaced persons camp southwest of Kiev named Anatevka was built by Chabad Rabbi Moish Osman to house Jews fleeing the 2014 Russian invasion of Ukraine. So there was
Yeah.
a little real life Anatevka camp.
Yeah. No, it's a very influential movie that I don't know. I would love to see this one live, like in person. Like the reason the horse is lame is because Tevka has to carry in the cart himself. Like you can't have a horse on stage, so they have to like create a justification for him carrying it, not a horse. I don't know. I think this would be so riveting to watch in person. The dream sequence, I would love to watch that in person. I think that would be I would fascinated to see how they would do that on a live stage. But yeah, there's so much going on. Watch the movie. It was so good. Perhaps the best one we've seen so far. I don't know. Jesus Christ Superstar, one of my favorites. So it's hard to gauge which one's better or worse. Both directed by Norman Jewison. Maybe we should be watching more of his movies.
Maybe Norman Jewison just needs to be a category on our movie list.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just start going through his. Well, thank you all for joining us today here at the Religious Treehouse. We try to expand our knowledge at all times. So if you have any recommendations, be sure to share them with us on YouTube, Spotify. I'm blanking on things we have: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Bluesky. We're no longer on that X Twitter thing. Email us. We love an email. Share your thoughts, your feelings, your recommendations so that we may communicate with you. This is all about conversation, guys.
Yeah.
And I hope you've had a great time visiting with us. We'll see
And
you later.
send this episode to a friend. Say,
Yes.
hey, you would either like or love this. Or hate, sorry. You would like, love, or hate this. Send it to that person so they can tell us how much they like, love, or hate this. And we'd love to hear from them as well.
Engagement is engagement, content is content, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.
If I was a rich man, what would you
So
do if
good.
you were a rich man?
I'd bada bada boom all the day long.